G'day, I'm Gary. This year I decided to experiment a little. I grew some potatoes in buckets inside my kiddie pool ponds. I'm pretty happy with the results so far. 30 plus years ago I grew a lot of potatoes in Australia. Since moving to the United States I haven't had the time to take care of them. They need a consistent water supply, and here in Southern California we don't get a lot of summer rain, so I set them up in ponds so that I've got a self-watering wicking system. That's not a potato, that's a potato. My garden is a wild garden. I grow mostly perennials. I've found that perennials can handle irregular watering a lot better than annuals. So my main root crop or starchy crop here are yams, and I do grow some sweet potatoes. So what I've got growing here are purple yams or ubes, and what I have along the ground are sweet potatoes. So what I'll do now is I'll show you how I set this up, and I'll come back and I'll show you what's inside the bucket. This was one of the first ponds that I set up. I've already harvested the potatoes from it. What this is a 42-inch kiddie pool that I lined with black plastic sheeting. On the bottom I added bricks. The bricks are there to elevate the buckets. When I'm growing in buckets I'm going to lose a lot of growing space because the roots won't go down below the waterline. So the buckets sit on top of the bricks. The waterline, the high water line is up here, the low water line's down there. So within a week or so, the water will drop. The water can still continue to go in and out of the holes. The holes that I drilled in the sides of the buckets are 1/2 inch holes, and they're about 2 inches from the base. So the water goes in and out. Because we don't have a lot of rain over summer, I don't have any issues with the soil becoming boggy. But if it does rain, I can always just lift the bucket out of the pond and set it to the side and allow the water to drain naturally, and then when it dries up again I can set it back in. If you live in an area where you get a lot of summer rain, this may not work out well for you. So the conditions in the bucket could get too boggy. The way the bucket works, think of it as an upside down pot. Instead of watering from the top, you're watering from the bottom. And because of the soil mix that I've got inside the buckets, which is our native clay mixed with some sifted wood chips, it's very consistent. So you want a consistent type of soil to put in your buckets so that the water will evenly wick up. So as the sun hits the top and the sides, it evaporates through the surface, so that draws the water from the bottom up. So the potatoes are growing from here down to here. So you've already restricted a lot of the space that the potatoes can grow in. So I only put one large or a couple of small potatoes in each bucket. If you were doing it on dry land, you may be able to put 2 in. Anyhow, this is the simple way that I've got things set up. I can get 7 buckets inside this space. I chose to put 5. The reason I've got 5, that allows space for the dragonflies to come in and lay their eggs. I'm growing in an organic, wild type way, so I want to encourage wildlife to come in to control any of the insects that I have. The juvenile dragonflies on the bottom of the pond feed on wrigglers. They assist the fish. Once they emerge, they control the flying mosquitoes. We have a couple of new Aedes mosquito species here now, and they come out during the daytime, but when I've got plenty of dragonflies around here, I don't have any issues with mosquitoes. Anyhow, this is my first pond, and I'll show you what I do with the other potatoes, and I've got a couple of ponds set up over there, so I'll go over there and I'll show you how I've got that working. So I've got a couple of different potatoes at different stages here. These ones are ready to be harvested. These ones are still growing. Here in Southern California, I can get multiple crops throughout the year. So if a potato is ready to grow, I just let it grow. So these ones I planted fairly recently, and they've got a couple of more weeks to go. I leave the potatoes in the water until their leaf colour starts to change. So the leaf colour of these ones are starting to go limey green, and these are nice dark green. When they start to go limey green, I remove them from the water, set them to one side to allow them to dry. If you leave a root crop like a potato sitting in damp soil, it will start to rot. So the best time to remove them is when they start to turn. This isn't going to grow anymore, so I'll set it to one side of the pond, let it dry out for a while. The potato will sense that it's dying, and it will send all its nutrition to the tubers. So I don't know how many is going to be in each bucket until I dump them out. So what I'll do now is I'll go back to the table and I'll start dumping some of the buckets out. All of the potatoes that I grow are early varieties. I purchased them from the grocery store. I went with organic as they aren't treated with a sprout inhibitor. I've never had any issues, but if you're concerned about bringing in potato blight or any other disease, then maybe you should go with seed potatoes. Seed potatoes are certified disease-free, and they're not really any more expensive than organic. I prefer the early varieties. They only take 10 to 12 weeks to produce. Some of the main crop varieties will take between 20 to 26 weeks. So the early varieties produce less. They only need 4 inches of soil, and they grow faster. For what I'm doing, they seem to work out better for me. Originally I've selected them to grow them under wood chips. So if I've got a 4-inch layer of wood chips, I grow the early varieties under that and they don't breach the surface. If you choose to grow a main crop, because they live longer, you'll get larger potatoes, and by the time they're fully matured, the larger potatoes will start to bust through the surface. So that's when you need to hill them or mound the soil up around them. I see no reason to mound the soil other than to protect the tubers from the sunlight and maybe to support the plants a little more. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to produce more potatoes. Anyhow, I'm going to empty this bucket into this other bucket here. Before that, I'll trim out the green part, so I'll trim that off. All of this can be composted, so I'll put this in my compost bucket. I haven't seen any diseases, so I'm comfortable cold composting that. That'll give you a rough idea of what I'm talking about, how I layer it. On the bottom of the bucket, I put in the sifted wood chips, so I kept this coarse material to sit in the bucket and fill it up just above the water line. So I've got the water holes here. The wood chips have started to break down, they've turned nice and black, so that I can put on my garden. So I've got a lot of small potatoes, but I seem to have some nice sized ones here. There is the layer. So the potatoes are growing on the single layer here. So they're growing from maybe 1 inch from the surface down to about 4 inches below. And below that is soil. So that's where the wood chips are, and the wood chips are meeting the soil around that height. So it's kind of stratified. I'm not sure what variety these are, but they're a small white variety. Most of the early varieties tend to be fingerling size. There's quite a lot of small potatoes, and the smaller ones, in my opinion, taste a lot better than the larger ones. The other benefit of growing in ponds, I don't have any pest issues. The main pests that I have here are sow bugs. In the past have come in and they've totally demolished my potatoes. They like eating the leaves. So very few things like eating potato leaves, but sow bugs or pill bugs are one thing that'll devastate your crop if you allow them to get out of hand. When you first lay out wood chips, there's a very good chance that you're going to have an insect explosion, and in my case it happened to be the sow bugs. The sow bugs are beneficial in that they break down organic matter, but they actually prefer to eat green foliage, and potatoes is something that they really like. Okay, so that's not too bad. So I'll just get this soil out of the way. Now that the wood chips have broken down a bit, I can mix it all through, and this will go on top of my garden. So that's not a bad little hole. I guess the potato that I originally put in was around this size. So something this size produced about 10 to 12 times the amount of potatoes. So that's a pretty good average. So I'll test a bunch of varieties and I'll keep the ones that I like and the ones that produce well. So this one's definitely a winner. I'm going to continue to grow in the buckets in my wicking pond system. The biggest benefit that I found this year is I haven't had to water them. All I have to do from time to time, maybe once a week or once every couple of weeks, is come through and top up the ponds. So I've got the watering under control, I've got the insects under control, and the maintenance is really very little maintenance. All you really need is to get yourself a bucket, set it up, get yourself a $8 to $10 kiddie pool, maybe some black plastic sheeting just to protect it from the UV rays. I use the black plastic sheeting now because that'll protect it for maybe a decade or more. If you don't cover the plastic, the surface tends to crack. I've grown in kiddie pools long enough to find that out. Hopefully you found this video interesting and useful. If you did, please like, subscribe and share. If you subscribe to our channel, you'll be able to go through and find us a lot easier. If you hit the bell notification, YouTube will notify you when we put a new video up. With that, thanks for watching, and don't forget to eat what you grow. I'll see you later.